Hi, everybody. If you are willing to be on video, please do. I think to make this more of a conversation, we encourage everybody to join on video if you're able to, and if not, no problem at all. We hope you can hear us, and if you can see us, even better. I'm going to kick us off by just introducing a few housekeeping notes. But first and foremost, thank you so much for taking time to join us at the RARE rounds. We are excited for our upcoming discussion on advancing diversity and inclusion in clinical research. Before we get everything kicked off, just wanted to review some of our housekeeping rules. All attendees are currently muted to reduce any interruptions, but maybe if we are able to, if someone has a question, you can verbally ask it, or you can through the Q&A or the chat box, and I'll make sure to pose it to the speaker who's with us here. So to open the chat, you just open the button on the bottom of the meeting controls. It's either the bottom or the top, and it's near the mute icon. If there are questions that are not able to be addressed during the conversation now, we will definitely do our best to follow up after the program. In the interest of making us all feel more connected, again, just turn on your videos as you see fit and if you're comfortable. If you have any technical difficulties or questions about the program, please visit the help desk in the main lobby where you can chat with our tech team and Global Gene staff members. Finally, we all encourage all of you to participate as active listeners and take advantage of an opportunity to hear from amazing leaders and experts that are with us and ask questions. This program is your time to learn and find answers on critical challenges in rare disease research. I'm now pleased to welcome our discussion leader, Marjorie Dejoie Brewer from the Sickle Cell Disease Association of America, the Philadelphia, Delaware Valley chapter. So Marjorie, please kick us off. And if anybody has any questions or needs anything throughout the session, I'm standing by looking at the chat, so please just be in touch. Thanks, Marjorie.
Thank you, Hilda. Good afternoon, everybody. So nice to be here. Looking forward to having this wonderful discussion. I'm just going to give you a little bit of a background about who I am and why I think I'm good to help a discussion and of this topic. Then we'll play a very quick video just to kind of get your minds flowing. And then I'll just give two quick scenarios that I think really depict and show how challenging sometimes maintaining and having diversity is, but how essential it is. And of course, why we're having this roundtable right now. And hopefully you guys can share some of your experiences and barriers, and then maybe we can talk through some things that are good suggestions and ways to move forward. So my background is varied. I wear multiple hats. I wear a hat of patient engagement for Pfizer, specifically for rare disease and under sickle cell disease, but I also touch other rare diseases. Medical director for the advocacy group Sickle Cell Disease Association of America. I work on the national level and the local level. I also worked as the transition liaison and hydroxyurea liaison, which is a new drug that we were using for sickle cell disease at CHOP within that's the Children's Hospital of Philadelphia. Within their team, when we were working with the teens there and adolescents and trying to get them to, again, adopt a new medication that we wanted to be part of their protocol. I am on one end a patient because I have a rare disease. On another end, I'm a provider because I am a physician. And on the other end, I am part of an advocacy group, and I've worked with different rare diseases, lupus, sickle cell disease, amyloidosis, in kind of furthering the cause and working on multiple ends. I've participated on the clinical end. I've helped with recruitment for research clinical trials, and I've also worked in the lab and worked with putting through the data and also kind of delivering the information on at the end, the outcomes, so to speak, to the focusing on the patient population, but also maintain the conversation between patients and providers, because that's such an essential link and such a big part of what research is, since that's what we're really talking about, diversity and inclusion when it comes to research. I've helped and been integral in a lot of promotional materials, so being able to help patient populations connect on that level, but also being user-friendly and helping develop those that are that connect with the provider on the other end when we're talking about research. That's usually the two ends that we discuss. So having said that as a little bit of a background, so you kind of know I have a foot in a toe in multiple circles. Here, let's just show that it's a very quick video, but I think it really speaks to what we're going to discuss today.
All right, share my screen here.
Awesome. Thank you, Hida. So the reason why I really like that video is each individual that comes to this conversation is unique, and every patient is very unique. So let me talk about that output first, the patient viewpoint. I think whenever campaigns are developed and pharma and other entities in the industry are approaching research and trying to be diverse in the population, there's a tendency to combine all individuals into one bucket. Be it from African American to Indian to Hispanic to Mexican. And what I've found in many research campaigns that we've done and many research clinical projects that we've conducted is that really catering to the individuals and really connecting to their disease process as individuals and their culture is essential. So that lumping them within a group, let's say, for instance, African American and Latinos, and just thinking we are doing something, we want to include the colored population or colored community within this, is actually not effective. And what you'll find, especially in rare disease, is that even within one subset, and let's specifically, we're talking, I'm going to reference the African American population, that even within that subset, there are very clear differences. And so what I've found in the work that I've done is the more that we can actually refine our materials and refine our approach based on research done, really plugging into these individuals on that micro level, then the better the outcome will be. And the reason being is that there are a lot of, we all have inherent biases, but then there are a lot of things that are just assumed. And in those assumptions, because we've seen 25 other people who have experienced it, it's then assumed for 500 and 1,000. And I'm going to refer to sickle cell disease specifically. What we found is that even in different buckets and even in different areas and states, because of their ecosystem, how they dealt with their illness, what their community looked like, and then how they proceeded with their treatment was not universal. And so to not research that and connect with them on that level would have been a detriment and was a detriment to some of the research attempts. So ergo why we didn't have enough numbers in some of our research trials to complete the trials or meet the numbers that were required. So what was done was what we call, and a lot of people call a deeper dive, really figuring out and connecting with the ecosystem that that patient finds themselves in. Once you understand that and where they're connected, you can then devise a pathway kind of into that community that's a trusted pathway. What I tell a lot of individuals is you have to take the opportunity to really sit and feel what those patients are going through in order to understand their path, because you're trying to provide something for their outcome. You're trying to provide something for them to adopt and almost agree with you to a certain extent blindly, because when we do clinical trials, the patient hasn't built an extensive partnership at the beginning of recruitment with that entity. So coming in as the quote unquote new face or new person, the diligence falls on, okay, let me talk as a physician and a recruiter or a researcher, falls on me, falls on us to ensure that I have done an in-depth ecosystem and ethnical and cultural landscape mapping, right? And then really connected to those patients or that community on the micro level. And that may mean go to their, that really means meet them at their location, meet them on their level or at their door, not invite them into my office so that we can, you know, conduct a meeting or have a conversation. Oh, tell me about yourself. No, actually go to the community and find the leaders in that community, discuss who really sways the public opinion when it comes to that community, that disease process, really try to go to the community hospitals and not just the university hospitals. I mean, all that really makes a significant difference. And then when we do that, what I've also seen is we hear what they're saying, but we don't listen to what they're saying and how they're saying it. It's very easy to take the information, kind of reformat it in a way that we think industry can do it better and then deliver it back to them. And what you're actually doing, what I found in different instances, is that the population just feels like you are actually negating what they took the 1 hour or 2 hour time frame to share with you. And it's interesting that being on the receiving end, we really think that we're helping the situation. We really think that we're contributing by saying, oh, I know that how we can maybe do this a little bit better in your community. Or I've seen it done in this part well, in this way, so why don't I just do it with you guys that way? And that 9 times out of 10, that will not work. You will actually, unfortunately, close a door instead of opening up a door. And once that door is closed, it's very difficult to open it again. I will also say that when and if you do identify a leader in the community and that you're able to build some bridges and that you're able to really connect, it is also extremely important to try to maintain the integrity of that relationship. So what I've also found is a very common error is once the connection is made, because large companies deal with multiple people, the primary contact person tends to rotate and change significantly. And for industry, it changes at the drop of a dime. And we're used to that in industry. We're used to that in pharma. We're used to that sometime in hospitals. But on a community level, they're going to identify with a particular person, a face that then embodies the entire company. And when and if that is shifted, the thought process is that relationship then completely changes. So when that's going to happen, I think we have to really approach that with kids' gloves, because really building a bond and some type of trusted relationship in a short period of time is extremely difficult and extremely challenging. So I would say that that comes to mind as something that I think is easily addressed and correctable as long as you go into it with your eyes open. So one, making sure that you're able to really sit, and it's going to be uncomfortable. It's going to be uncomfortable to sit and understand the journey that that patient and whoever is around them has taken. But you will magnify your opportunities for success in so many fold that it's worth that extra time. And yes, it will not happen overnight. It will not happen in a week. It will not happen in a month, because it's a rare disease. They probably had it in their entire lives, and they can probably tell you stories. But you kind of have to be vested in that process. I think another thing that individuals doing research trials have to really take the time to identify are the barriers. And I think every group has found their share of barriers when they're on this path. And a lot of those barriers become common barriers. Knowing what those barriers are going in and being able to, number one, address them on an individual basis for the individual population is extremely important. Number two, sometimes we use barriers as reasons to say, well, I tried and it didn't work. And what we have to realize in the rare disease population, and in research trials, I think it's with any disease, but especially in this environment, is that it's going to take extra time to handle those barriers. There are going to be some that pop up that we didn't even consider, and that we should never use those barriers as our reason/excuses to retract. I'll give you a perfect example. When talking about the sickle cell population, one of the barriers that individuals thought they were faced with was the use of medication for pain management. And that was a huge campaign, of course, that everyone is aware of that happened. And unfortunately, the sickle cell patient was placed on that list as opioid users/abusers. And a lot of individuals and industry that came into the population saw that as, well, how do we, a barrier, and mistakenly use that. We'll never be able to get through to that population because that's all that they rely on. They primarily rely on that. Now, as the numbers came out and as more research was done, it was shown that the sickle cell population is not the major factor in when it comes to opioid use, number one. And every component of industry now that's dealing with that patient population has seen that they can respect both tracks. They have their medication and they know that there's a baseline. And once it's integrated, it makes for a good union and a good treatment plan. Incorporating patients into the conversation at the beginning of their research trials made a huge difference. And I think that's what turned the tide, so that they, one, understood what was going on, because you started seeing representatives from industry and larger universities attending the meetings of advocates, attending the state-provided meetings that were public, reading more of that information to find out what was the history and what part did that play in their treatment plan. And once they understood all that, they were able to come up with a formula that worked. And it's not even in the conversation anymore, interestingly enough, 5 years down the road and 5 pharmaceutical companies all coming up with treatment protocols for that rare disease. So it's definitely doable. It's really all about the approach. One other example I want to share before I want you guys to kind of think about some barriers that you've come up with, and let's see if we can maybe continue our conversation based on barriers and how we can get through them, because I think that's really productive, kind of some take-home messages, was some of my work with the American Red Cross. So I'm also on their diversity and inclusion committee. And one of the major treatment protocols, and the only one actually for a very long time, was blood transfusions. And we initiated, the physicians that I trained under initiated the Blue Tag program, which was specifically geared towards getting blood donations for the sickle cell community. And when we did the campaign, it specifically said the preference would be, it's always good to match your blood type with individuals that are of your ethnical and cultural background. So African American and Latino donations were important and valued and wanted. We were not able, the Red Cross was not able to get the numbers that they wanted during their first year or two. And so we developed a campaign where we partnered with churches. We went in and we spoke to the advocacy groups. We went in and spoke to patients while they were getting the transfusions, those patients and their families. We went and spoke to more of the physicians who were treating sickle cell patients and the main hospitals that were providing that service, because not all hospitals provide transfusions. And we set up workshops, actually, and speaking engagement at the churches before we actually set up the blood drives. So we partnered with about 8 or 10, so it was a very concentrated program. We used some of the major entities, the radio entities, because we felt most people would listen to the radio in Philadelphia. We tagged and associated with one particular person, which we knew was very well known and trusted in the community. And we approached not just the larger churches, we really first went to the patients and asked, what churches did you attend? Because the most sensitivity then would be, if they know them in their congregation, they're gonna wanna help those patients as much as possible. I even helped the American Red Cross design a school program, because a lot of these kids are teens. So we designed a teen reward program where even if teens weren't able to give blood, their friends knew someone or had a parent that they could then do a blood drive, and we constructed a whole program around that. So once we sat down and teased out some of the barriers and identified practical ways that we could get through those barriers, then we set up the program. We did an entire, campaign and getting the word out. And we even did some of the blood drives around events that the churches already had set up. And we were able to triple their donation. So that's on the side of the patient. Now, there were internal biases and issues on the side of the American Red Cross that had to be dealt with. But the only way that we were able to identify them was that we needed to build a team that literally followed step one from when the person signed up and tried to identify where that blood went, who got it, what hospital it went to, and so on and so forth. And in doing that homework, in getting entrenched within the system, we found 3 barriers. The first was that automatically, now remember, the campaign said that donations from African Americans and Latinos were preferred, but anyone who has any medical background, you know, it comes down to a blood type match. If you have the blood type that I have, then that's perfect. That's what I need to, that's what I rely on. So the technicians, if the donor was not African American, even though they said they were participating in the blue tag program, and they didn't check the African American box when you register by computer, they did not give that blood product to sickle cell patients. So that was the first. So I did a blood drive at a ShopRite. That's a big community attended ShopRite. So we had a very diverse population, and every population actually gets sickle cell disease. It is not just an African American disease. It's a rare disease, but it affects everyone. So we had a very good collection of African American, Latino, Asian, and Caucasian donors. We surpassed the number of donors that we actually had registered, which, you know, anyone who does a blood drive knows the technicalities. You can register online. We suggest that you do, but we take people who come in. And when we got the numbers of donations, so we actually were almost double the donations. But then when I talked to the team of what was entered, it was half the number that showed up. And everyone who showed up, only because I went in and accompanied each person, I really wanted to see the process. It was labor intensive, but it was necessary, said, I'm donating my blood for the blue tag program. But when it got to the step of the lab, only half of the supply actually went to where it needed to be. So what we realized was we needed to then do an internal diversity, inclusion, and re-explanation of what the blue tag program was. We got a patient, we got a provider, and we got someone actually from the American Red Cross who had been linked to the disease process because they were a mother of a patient. And we had them all talk to the lab techs. And then we had to talk with some of the people who were a little higher up. And in having that conversation, then we did see a shift. It took a little while. We did see definitely a shift in the increase in blood donation by 30%, which was amazing. They do that program every summer because summer months are better for the churches. That's when they do their outdoor events and so on and so forth. But it really was an eye-opener for everyone on every single level. So it's about changing the language. What kind of campaign are we doing? Are we really touching the hearts of the patients? We even involved them in making their own YouTube videos, which then the American Red Cross was willing to endorse, support, and then put on their channel. So it became a larger than life campaign, so to speak, but it has really changed so many people's lives. So those are the 2 examples I wanted to highlight, 2 of many that we can talk about that really show why diversity and inclusion, kind of where it fits in and how important it is, and in addressing it early on and really connecting with the patient population and looking at the barriers, you can have more successes than not successes. So I'll take a pause there. If anybody wants to talk, submit, if any questions were already submitted, or if there were certain barriers that maybe we can expand this conversation on, feel free to plug them in the chat box.
Thank you, Marjorie. We do have some questions, so I'm just going to go from top to bottom. So the first question in the chat is, One of the issues for everyone is low health literacy. More specifically, understanding of biopharma R&D and clinical trials. What approaches have you seen used to improve people's understanding of different situations so that they can partner with pharma better?
Great question, and we have dealt with that on so many different levels. One of our presenters yesterday said it well. They used the medical jargon, university level information, catchphrases and all that, so that when you deliver that information to people in the community, they're looking at you almost with a blank face, and therefore your message is not getting across. In the campaigns that I have worked on that have worked well, we have actually partnered with literary experts that know how to rewrite the language. And a lot of times people say it should be at a 5th grade level. So we've taken brochures that were already done, redigested them, had a literary person, educational person help us rewrite it in user-friendly language and using visuals that were more appealing to the population, even sometimes shortening what an 8-page brochure we realized is too long, and we needed a 4-page brochure. We even looked at the colors that were used. We even looked at the font that was used. So I would say partnering with, and in certain, what we were able to do and I was able to highlight is that within the disease process, and let's say you partner with a particular hospitals, a lot of times they already have someone there that has been working with them with their parent network, with getting the message to their patients, with getting the message to other individuals in the hospital that may be helping out. So if that's already established and they're used to that jargon, we've partnered with them and helped to rewrite different pamphlet inserts, different booklets, and even do different visual aids when necessary.
Thank you.
Oh, and one more thing. We've involved patients on the board when we have the first draft or second draft. Well, the suggestion would be have a patient present, 1 or 2, have them help reread it and tell them what information you get from it. And a lot of times, I think what's best is the immediate reaction. So we set up live meetings where we told them, you know, read it right on, because you want that initial, what the initial reaction or their initial understanding is what's going to stick with them, not necessarily when they reopen it and read it 3 or 4 times. So what I was able to set up was, once we got the jargon down packed, I think we actually interviewed 12 to 15 individuals, and from different states, from different locations, had them, do it in real time. Read this paragraph, tell me what you understand from it. Does it make sense to you? Do you think somebody else will, in your environment, will understand it? What did you get from this? Did you like the visual? So having that real-time interview, and then we would take that information, go back, redigest, and then present it again to that population, or a percent of that population, and then a new percent of a new individual who hadn't seen anything yet, to see if the changes really drove the message home. Sorry, that's a key piece. That's a newer piece that they weren't doing before, that we were able to add to some of the pharma campaigns that I was part of. And I think it definitely made a big difference.
Thank you. Another question, Marjorie, you mentioned partnering with the churches to reach your audience. Can you expand on that, and how do you scale that in the case of a volunteer-run organization?
Great question. So the way we did it initially was that we pooled the parent network, or the parents that were involved with the patients or teens that were churchgoers. We found out which churches that they attended. We also tried to find out in the communities which were the larger churches, because of course the larger churches will be able to do some of these things a little quicker than other churches. We partnered with the advocacy group in the state. So it was a combination of the advocacy group, the American Red Cross, that funded the actual drive. So you have the industry personality was the American Red Cross for this particular example. Then the advocacy group, and then the patients that identified the churches that they thought were the best churches. And then we just did an overall pool of the churches in Philadelphia and which ones were most attended and had a more diverse population, so we could approach them, because we wanted to make sure that we were inclusive as much as possible, thinking that the first year we'll do these 8 or 10, and the next year we'll do these 8 or 10. Now from that, from that, after that initial assessment, we got volunteers from the advocacy group, actually. Some of the parents got their kids to help out. We did not put it on the church, but what we did was we partnered with the church on a day that they were already had something going on. That was also always our first choice, because it meant that they were already manned and set for something. So when you take like a very large church, they usually have individuals that are doing the traffic, that are setting up people going what door and this door. What service are we attaching it to? Are we doing it for the morning service, the afternoon service? Do we have a weekday or a weekend? So we tried to make sure that we involved them at the beginning. And once the minister was on board, we always tried to meet with the highest person in the church. Once the minister is on board, it's kind of whatever the minister says, the congregation really bands behind. We gave them literature so that they could distribute the literature within their normal distribution. So it was, again, no extra work. The advocacy group and the American Red Cross were responsible for making the copies and so on and so forth. So they already knew that it was coming up. We showed up with the 10 people, and American Red Cross supplied the individuals that were actually doing the work by the bus, if we did it with a bus, or in the lobby. So that's how we made up for a volunteer process, and also using some of the volunteers are people from the Red Cross. For some communities, we did it with a block party, actually. There were two or three families that were having a block party, and they knew that their neighborhood was having a big block party, so we conducted the blood drive on the day of the block party. If there was a building or a rectory available, we used it, but we had a bus. I mean, the American Red Cross had a bus. So we could always set it up outside. And I love the block party one was awesome, because people were coming for the petting zoo, they were coming for the food, they were already hanging out. If someone didn't have the right number with the first stick, we told them come back in the afternoon. So again, it took the weight off of needing too many people there because they were already manned, but we did the intricacies of the organizing, calling, doing the follow-ups, doing a last minute shout out. And I know that what we also provided as the nonprofit advocacy group was that we actually went to the church. I did a lot of those pre-visits with whoever was, we also partnered with a program called Bridging the Gaps, which is a program run by different universities. That University of Pennsylvania partners with Drexel, and what they have is they have interns. If you're a med student or a nursing student or an engineer student, a lot of times during your first year, you can sign up for an internship, which I did when I was in med school. And you can do community service. So I was one of the mentors and advisors. So every year we got 2 interns, and their main project was this. So again, they got credit, great photo ops, great presentation. They helped out the community, but we had individuals to do all that work. So whatever was going on within the advocacy group or whatever was on the agenda, everybody kind of had a job. And since they did it efficiently, the weight didn't completely fall on any one person, but collectively, we got the job done. I hope that helps.
Yeah, thank you. Well, another question, and you kind of touched on this a little bit, but maybe if you can expand or give some more specifics in terms of recommendations, is what resources are out there for messaging online to increase participation and engagement in diverse communities with clinical trials and patient registries?
Okay, so I can, this one, for instance, what we've done, we partnered with some of the major medical organizations, let's say, like, for instance, ASH. For us, it was national, also national SCDAA. A lot of times within the disease process, there is a major medical association, so AMA. And what we did was we discussed the need for clinical trials. We discussed the need for having a more diverse presence. And the wonderful thing was that a lot of these organizations took the initiative to start their own internal committee. So for sickle cell disease, I'll just reference that because that's kind of what I've been talking about. I can talk about some other, like lupus and some other illnesses that I've been part of, because amyloidosis did the same thing. They started, though, outside the United States with their amyloidosis advocacy groups, and then they expanded it to their physicians. But national SCDAA designed a clinical trial specific track where they trained the different heads of chapters underneath that organization in clinical trials. They took the physicians that people were connected with, they took some of the research that was already done, and then they identified candidates who would be willing to go out in the community. And each of these candidates had a web page, or they were on Instagram, and then they created, the acronym was NASCAN, I think, but we created a page for just clinical trials that individuals could then relate to. But then we also did the major CDC page. So what we did was, within this training block, we trained the community in knowing how to look for and identify clinical trials that were suitable for them. And in part of this training, we had testimonials. We had individuals who participated, why they participated, and how it then helps and feeds the population. So ASH, in a certain way, mimicked that prototype, and they, of course, expanded the number of physicians and all that, because they can. They're ASH. They're huge. They're the National, Hematology Association. So I was very happy to see that. So they did the same. They involved advocates, they involved providers, they involved research entities, and they made sure they included individuals that had already been through clinical trials. And once you teach individuals the steps, it's not as daunting. Once you can speak to the why, it's not as daunting. And the way we did the training, we really broke it down almost into games and vignettes. So the way they learned it, that's another thing we talked about with the literacy. It wasn't just a presentation. It was we really integrated them in the process. So we had them draw things. We had them express their views and their concerns. We broke those concerns down. It was a very interactive training program. And at the end of the training program, they were then equipped to go in their community and set up smaller meetings. And within setting up smaller meetings, they would keep posting. Anytime someone did a trial, they asked them to post. Anytime someone went through just even going through being interviewed and asking questions, they would give them a site. What was beneficial with some of the pharma companies that I worked with, I was able to talk to them, and we actually did videos with the patients. And a lot of times they get actors to do it, and they do a nice long video and it becomes 2 or 3 parts. But I said, you guys, they can tell it's an actor. So please, can we use the patients? You might have to tease it out a little more. You might have to stroke it a little more, but the patients will connect with it so much more. So one or two actually of the companies that I was able to work with actually did a whole series of videos, and then they posted it. And then they gave access to the videos to the advocacy groups. They gave access to the videos, and they asked them to be shown during conferences. They asked them to show them when they were having meetings. So it was like this, domino effect that you would see it over and over and over and over again. And I think the last thing that helped a lot was some of these projects, if a researcher up and coming had a project or an idea that they thought would be good, they started a research fund that individuals were actually given grants for, and the submissions were open to all different types. And there was a specific category that focused on what would improve advocacy and clinical trials. And through that, there were some amazing ideas. And if the board decided that would get a grant, then individuals were able to then pursue that track and try it out in the community. But then it just generated some really good ideas that individuals might not have thought about and put together. So it gave a fresh look, a new eye of how to maybe get that information out on social media, how to get it out on Instagram, and figure out what people were really looking at, listening to, and how they were communicating, so the word of a clinical trial was getting out. And I have to say, over the past 3 years, in the populations that I've dealt with or am dealing with, the conversations on clinical trials is done a 360, where people were like, no one's doing a clinical trial on my disease process. Now it's like, did you hear that? And I was like, you heard before me? That's perfect. That's exactly what I wanted. And I'm going to sign up. And the best thing is to hear a patient say, it probably won't help, because they know now the light bulb has gone off. There was a campaign that was done, and I forget what organization sponsored it, but they actually went from state to state, and they set up different hubs and 2-day meetings where they debunked I should say, the misconceptions. And they just help the community just understand. They just had a conversation and making sure the light bulb went off. It wasn't about, you should register, we want you to, this is what's done. It was strictly about, we want you to understand what the steps are. It was extremely successful. And individuals who, they got the point that even if this drug may not work for me, it may work for someone else 10 years from now. So I'm going to participate in it. And until last year, I had never, except for myself, I'll be in every clinical trial that I can, participate in. Someone please find a cure for me, just make me better. But I'm a physician, so I know how important that is. I've done research for 8 years. I know that's important. But to hear the layperson say that, to hear the person in the community who has just been afraid of clinical trials say that, and you know that they're going to tell someone else that, and they're going to listen to what that person says. Oh, it's great. And then we did a text chain. That's the other thing. If someone saw a clinical trial or decided they were going to participate, they would text it to their friends. So if they weren't on Instagram, or if they weren't on Facebook, or they maybe weren't on their computer looking, because they got the text, or they were willing to share that I did well, or I heard about this, that was another avenue that paid off with dividends. Hope that helps.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much, Marjorie. We've got, I just announced, we've got about 15 or so minutes left. And so please do submit any additional questions. Another question that just came in the chat. Dealing with rare diseases and small patient groups, how do we find patients and get them into the registry using communication technologies?
So similar to the other, what I've seen work, is because in rare disease, there's a concern and a fear of what will be done with my information. Or do I own my information, and can I get it and retrieve it once I put it in a registry? What I've seen work best is when a physician that is trusted in that community spearheads or is part of a team that is setting up that registry and can on one level or another ensure and show the patients that you have access to this info. It's not like someone is just going to take it and run wild with it. But you can get it back and what the benefit is of that registry. Then I find that the numbers go up. In individuals registering. And in small populations and with rare disease, I also find that designing call to actions around the registry. So whatever, day it might be that you can post for a holiday or a walk that someone is having, always having that call to action, or a new organization that just has a day that they want to do a call to action. Having that call to action be registering in the registry is and continues to be, I think, very effective. When you have the patients, another thing we tried to do was actually set up laptops and notepads within the clinical setting, so that when a patient was waiting for their appointment, be it a university hospital or a community hospital, because there's a social worker that you can usually connect with, arming the social worker with the laptop. And I say sometimes arming because you might have to provide it. You never know if there's not a computer over there. But if you can have a notepad that already has the link and has everything there, when those patients come in, because then a lot of times they might have one day where it's all sickle cell patients come in that particular day. A lot of hospitals, that's how they do with this rare disease. Lupus, they might have, or amyloidosis, they might have a clinic that, and they will go to certain physicians because there's not a huge amount that are specialists for these rare diseases. So that when they come in for their appointment, if that registry and notepad is there, and if the social worker has time or someone from the advocacy organization has time to explain the importance, that has also helped increase the numbers of registrants. So that's what I've seen work and help when it comes to a rare disease or in the rare disease setting.
Mm-hmm. So another comment that just came in, our major challenges for us to find patients with a rare disease. Any specific tips on that part?
Ooh, that's always a hard one. So what we usually try to talk to people in different states, because individuals within the state will, interestingly enough, always connect and find someone who has their illness, which, as rare as it may be, and all of a sudden, I mean, there are some that are rarer than others, so it's very, very difficult. When I've gone to Global Gene or Rare Life combined events, they usually have representatives from different rare diseases. Even if that rare disease is only 5 individuals, someone is connected to that platform or is attending that meeting or is sending someone to that meeting, and they usually have their information accessible. If you make your information public, you can find them. And if it's, or the diseases that are represented, usually they give a summary, because they ask you what disease you have, of all the individuals that have the, what diseases are there. So then from there, I've actually found people who found people who have the rare disease that I may have. A lot of times physicians, when they're doing research projects, because it's so rare, but they have more manpower and they have the staff and they have the funding, they're searching, So if you connect with someone who's ahead of a trial that's already going on, or do research on trials that have gone on in the past, they may be able to then help you connect with individuals that they, or at least if they can't give you the info, of course they shouldn't, they can't, but they can send your info. You can say, can you send my info, because I'd like to, talk to them, connect with them. So those are the 3 or 4 ways that I've found it's best to find people that have it. And what I never underestimate, the power of conversation. I always say that with this illness, with sickle cell disease and being a rare illness, it's really 3 degrees of separation. So if you're not, and a lot of times having a rare disease, we're not necessarily willing to reveal ourselves. A lot of times we live in the shadows because we have to protect ourselves to a certain extent. You never know what reaction you're going to get on the end. So now I'm putting my patient hat on. And what I've seen is everybody knows somebody who has the illness. And if it's even rarer, then they know somebody who knows somebody who knows somebody who knows somebody. When you're willing to open up a little bit and talk, the most random things will happen. I remember once I was at the gym and I chose a different locker that day, and someone who was getting dressed, Caucasian female, all the way on the other end, I happened to mention sickle cell, and I had a song on that she liked, I was playing. She turned her head, oh, I like that song. And then it related to sickle cell somehow. So I brought it up. She goes, oh my God, this guy on my block had sickle cell and we were the best of friends. Okay, from that day on, we became friends. I found out who her friend was. He was added to the group. And you just never know who knows who, and who is going to be sensitive and can relate to your plight and your platform, and who wants to connect. And now she posts more about sickle cell on her Instagram page than sometimes I feel like I do. But it was another friend, but more importantly, she was an advocate, but I connected to another patient who really needed the support at the time, and we were able to bring him into the fold. So never underestimate the power of conversation. Oh, what was the song? I saw that question. Dude, it actually was a rap song, and one of these rappers actually had sickle cell disease because she was really into rap, but I cannot remember the song right now. But if I remember, when I remember, I will send it so you can get it. The power of music, that's the other thing. You never know. Good question.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. I wanted to make sure to state this comment that came through. It says, Marjorie, thanks for your suggestion to reach out to trusted physicians to reassure the community about how personal data can and cannot be used and is governed by privacy laws and patient registries. Julie says, you're reminding me that some communities have less trust than others in data collection. I think about the history of Henrietta Lacks.
Oh, good one. Great book. But yes, I'm happy that connected and resonated.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. So I don't know, Marjorie, if you want to get into this. So we've got about 10 minutes left here.
Okay.
I know yesterday during the conversation, there was a lot of discussion about terminology and what is appropriate terminology to use in communication and outreach materials, and you know, making things culturally competent. And you mentioned visuals and imagery, but what about the language that we're using?
That was a good hot topic yesterday, and so important. I think when you are able to, so there needs to be a level of comfort so that you can understand. So I think that if you partner with someone who is entrenched in the community, let's say you're doing this from scratch and you don't necessarily want to take my word for it, but partner with someone in the community and feed off of their terminology and what they use and what they describe themselves as, and tell them before, you know, I'm going to use these words and tell me which one you prefer. But what we discussed yesterday was being direct and to the point and not being too verbose and overgeneralized. So it's not a colored, you know, I'm not doing the colored community. I am actually going to the African American or the Black person. I mean, we know that it's specific, and I don't take offense. I mean, that is the color of my skin, so to speak, on a couple of lyrics and songs that I can come and think of at the moment. But that does not offend the population. That just, I think that group, if you're saying Hispanic or Latino, Latina, if you're saying Mexican, that's how we identify ourselves. So being able to be direct in your information as you use it speaks to the point that, oh, I know who you're talking to. When a person comes by and picks up your information or looks at your pamphlets or listens to your video, you're talking to me. If you use a generalized term, people of color, it's almost like there are a lot of people of color. So maybe you're not talking to me. Maybe I'm excluded at this point, so I'm not going to pay attention to what your literature is saying or what the question is or the point you're trying to make. But if you're specific and you're respectful in being specific, and you've already done your testers as far as terms used in that particular community, then it's better to be direct and kind of hit the nail on the head, because that is me. Oh, that photo, that illness, that is me, and that's what I'll respond to. You'll get much better response than if you're too general or too soft, so to speak. I know that we're in a climate that we're all trying to be politically correct. But, you know, as they say, you call a spade. That's not a bad thing. A spade is a good card. You win in spades when you have spades. So you want to be able to speak to the individual, speak directly to them, and be inclusive. And by being direct, because if you called me yo, I would not turn around. But if you said Marjorie Dejoie Brewer, I know you're talking to me. I'm going to pay attention, and I'm going to turn, and I'm going to look at you, and I'm going to engage in a conversation. So I think we should feel confident and safe in talking directly to those communities when we're using our information, when we're designing our information, when we're designing our talking points, when we're designing our visual aids. And every big industry usually does their tester, you know, so that they can really be sensitive towards the population, but you do want to be specific. And I think that's the biggest point we made yesterday.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. So I think as we close out, maybe Marjorie, just ask you to recap some of your, you know, what do we need to do as soon as we close our laptops and, you know, what are the things that we need to take action on immediately and now, things that we should not be contemplating any longer, that are understood as necessity. What are those things? And then after that, if you could share with us what you're most excited about in research for the rare disease community.
Absolutely. I think the biggest thing when you close your laptops is that we are individuals, and when we're looking for outcomes, we really focus here, and I talked about this yesterday. We're focused on the deliverables. We're focused on the outcomes. But what I really want people to be focused on is not the performance, but the transformation. So if you focus on transforming yourself in understanding the process, in really communicating, in allowing yourself to be uncomfortable in order to get it, because you have to realize the person on the other end of the equation, which is the patient, is going to be uncomfortable, and they're also trying to get it. But if you really immerse yourself into their experience, you're going to understand their journey in a very different way, and you can't do that on your laptop. When I've helped in campaigns with amyloidosis, when I've helped with campaigns with lupus, when I've helped with campaigns with other rare diseases, I personally can fall under the rare disease umbrella, but I didn't have those illnesses. So I did due diligence to get to know, to talk to ask questions, to connect, and to really almost live the day in the life of that person the way they saw it. Because that will provide you with knowledge, information, and a bond that no research on a laptop or a computer or talking to someone else or reading a book will do. And to be able to do that will then reduce your internal biases, and you'll be then open. It just will be, we're including everyone and not just diversity inclusion. It's just inclusion because they should be included. So be willing to get uncomfortable and be willing to transform. I would say that's the first thing. The second thing is to realize that you cannot generalize your information. If I had to give another take-home message, you have to go to that community specifically and spend the time and not think that, let's say I'm taking Philadelphia for instance, and not think that the information from Mount Airy is going to be effective for the population in West Philadelphia. You cannot make that assumption. If you make those assumptions, you will lose at the door. But if you know that those are already barriers, then you always stay ahead of them by doing your homework and your research first. One of the speakers yesterday was that do your ethnography landscape, do that workshop, or partner with an organization that may have already done it, because it will show you things that you didn't even consider. And then again, you won't come against that barrier. You'll actually go into the situation with the right information. And one point that I made yesterday is after you've done your research, it's another thing that we can do really quick, because some of you have already done research, but have you looked at the research from the perspective of the individuals and communities that are suffering from that rare disease? Because if you only look at it from the organization or the entity or the company that you hired to do it, you're not getting the full story, because they're just putting facts and numbers together, and they might not have spent a lot of time on the phone with individuals talking to them. So you need to, again, take that raw information and put it into context. So until you get the entire picture, you're gonna be working up against, a lot more barriers than you need to. So I would say those are like 3 immediate things, because then you're connecting on all those levels. You're connecting and you're really building an understanding that you did not have, a fundamental one, that will change your potential and possible outcomes, since that's what we, at the end of the day, we're really all focused on. And I think another speaker yesterday, Arnie, said it well. If you reboot and think about the bottom line, which is the dollars that we're making from this clinical trial or this drug or whatever, you have to realize that where the investment of those dollars need to be made on the front end, so that you will have the best outcomes and it'll be worth every dime invested. And as far as hope for the future, I have so much hope, but I am most hopeful that individuals will not be afraid to have the right conversation, because any conversation that creates change and has results is going to be an uncomfortable conversation. Both sides are going to deal with and have to face their biases. It's not just the industry. It's not just the patient population. Everyone has their internal biases. Everyone has their barriers. But I do think the onus and the biggest job falls on us. Now I'm speaking with my industry hat on, falls on us as an industry to do that work, because historically we haven't done it. And every time individuals come to the table and they're willing to put their hearts and limbs on the line, they are faced with something or a misstep and they recoil, and so then the community recoils also. And since we are in a time where the current situation with COVID places other barriers and mistrust on anyone who's dealing with any health entity or treatment process, it's a current wound that we have to be willing. I am hopeful that people are very willing to see it for what it is today, embrace it, and then have those difficult conversations, because they know that at the end point is benefits to all. You're either the industry that's making more money, or you're the patient that's getting a cure for an illness that no one was talking about 10 years ago, or no one was talking about maybe for some individuals 5 years ago, but they're having the conversation now. So I'm hopeful that we will be having those robust conversations that will literally change and save patients' lives exponentially.
Thank you so much, Marjorie. You know, for anybody who would like to listen to this conversation again, or hear the conversation that we had yesterday with our other panelists, Pernessa Steele and Ani Johnson.
Can I just say, I like that comment that Lisa just made. You can't fill somebody else's cup. Yeah, awesome comment, Lisa.
Yes. She said you can't fill another person's cup until you know what's in it already.
Yeah. And sometimes it doesn't taste too good, but you got to try it. you have to fill that cup up and try what they've been drinking their entire lives.
Yeah, absolutely.
Very good comment. Absolutely.
The humility there.
Yes.
You don't know what you don't know.
You don't know what you don't know.
Thank you, Marjorie, so much. And this conversation will be available as an archive, as well as yesterday's conversation. We'll be posting all of the event webinars through our RARE University portal. So you'll have a chance to check out yesterday's discussion and re-listen to this, or share it with others who you think may benefit. Marjorie, thank you so much for leading a great discussion, and thank you to the audience for your questions. Just check out the next session on the agenda. There's a session starting now, 2:30 to 3:30, and we hope that you've been enjoying so far, and definitely be in touch with us if you have any questions or would like to work with us on any of these topics. Thank you, Marjorie.
Thank you so much for letting me be part of this wonderful conversation. I think they have my information, so if anybody has any questions, please feel free to forward them. Thank you so much. Have a good rest of your conference.
Thank you, everybody.